Are you looking for a sweet and romantic love story? Ones that make you feel like you're being enveloped in a warm hug during a summer day? What about a bittersweet story that makes you rethink how you wish to live your life from now on? Then this book is definitely for you. The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston is another one of those books that have grown popular over time, especially in the booktok community. Now, personally, I like to judge books for myself, so how famous they are matters not to me. I only care if the story was good, entertaining, or moving. And this book, to me, ticks all of those boxes. I felt my heart flutter, shed some tears, and finished this book feeling like I suddenly wanted to see my grandma and reconnect with my child self. It's one of those books that are written in simple prose and seems to be a cliche romantic storyline, and yet it's done in such a delicate manner that it just works. So without further ado, welcome to my book review on the 7-Year Slip. So, first of all, let's start with what this book is about. The 7-Year Slip is an incredibly beautiful and emotional story involving our main protagonist, Clementine, a grieving book publicist who has recently inherited her dead aunt's magical apartment in New York City. Following the sudden death of her beloved Aunt Analia, Clementine is trying her best to keep her life together when she finds out that the laws of time and space within her aunt's apartment functions differently than the world outside of it. At random times, when she steps inside the apartment, she finds herself transported 7 years into the past. As someone who is emotionally guarded and worn down by the reality of adult life, Clementine does not believe in the supernatural. Nonetheless, Clementine is forced to acknowledge that her aunt's apartment has incredibly magical perks that come with it, including the presence of a young man living inside the apartment 7 years in the past. Clementine reluctantly allows this man to stay inside her apartment, believing that since he exists 7 years in the past, there should be no problem with them interacting with each other. But things start to go wrong when Clementine realizes how utterly charming this young man was. She knows that this romance can never be real. He lives 7 years in the past and she lives 7 years in the future. Their love is simply impossible, transcending time itself. As you can tell from the synopsis of this story, this book is definitely a tearjerker. It is a story about dealing with grief, rekindling one's passion in life, learning to acknowledge how people just change over the years, and also coming to terms with the fact that sometimes it's all just a matter of timing. As always, I will start with the spoiler-free section of the book review, where I discuss both the things I liked and didn't like about the book. So first of all, let's talk about some of the things that I really enjoyed about the book. To be honest, there's actually quite a lot, and it's hard to explain when all the things I enjoyed are heavily intertwined, but I will try my best to explain to you guys the main points. Let's start by talking about our narrator first. I found Clementine to be an incredibly relatable character. She is someone who is currently grieving the death of not only her beloved aunt, but her own passion as well. Ever since she was a young child, Clementine grew up admiring her aunt's adventurous soul. She loved going on spontaneous trips with her aunt and picked up her own hobby of painting. She would draw paintings of the places she went to and found herself wanting to grow up to be just like her aunt. But then tragedy struck, and one day she learned that her aunt had supposedly committed suicide. It was then she realized that even her adventurous aunt could not escape from loneliness. This incredibly haunting tragedy ended up completely changing Clementine. She became more emotionally guarded and withdrawn. She stopped painting and chose to focus on the stability of her career as a book publicist, even if it wasn't exactly what she truly wanted to do. She grew to become afraid of change and settled for anything stable instead. I personally really resonated with Clementine and her decisions to pursue a stable career instead of her true passion. I think it's something that many of us have gone through before. When life gets hard, sometimes we just become so miserable, but there's no way to escape from the mundane reality of adult life, so you kind of just end up losing yourself along the way. This is a very common issue that I think everyone in their 20s has to go through, maybe even in their 30s. When you realize that you're slowly wasting your life away because of work responsibilities. Aside from Clementine's obsession with her work, I also appreciated the emotional journey she went through when she realized she was falling in love with the main male character, Iwan, twice, the him from 7 years in the past and the him in the present. For me, it felt like she was seeing her own lost youth within his changes. She fell in love with Iwan originally for his carefree and sincere attitude towards cooking, but realized that in the present, he grew to become more jaded and grounded. Nonetheless, despite his changes, she still manages to find glimpses of his old self. This whole reconciliation between one's past and future is a recurring theme in this story, and I thought the author explored it in a very engaging manner. I truly felt like I saw myself in both Clementine and Iwan. As we grow up, we inevitably change, right? But it's also equally important that we don't completely throw away all of our childish dreams because they are an essential part of what makes us fulfilled. Aside from Clementine and Iwan, I also truly understood Analia, Clementine's aunt. She was clearly suffering from depression, but masked it behind her love for adventure and engaging stories. When I listened to Clementine thinking about her aunt, it made me also want to romanticize my own life and make it sound way more dramatic and fun than it actually is. I also want to go out there and be adventurous, travel around the whole world, and paint beautiful pictures with watercolor paint of people living in their own bubbles. It's really the ideal life. So I really loved Analia's character, even if she's simply haunting the narrative. I knew that she was already dead, but every single time Clementine thinks about her aunt and, talks about their memories together, I just felt so moved because Analia lived her life as freely as she could. She was such an incredible influence on Clementine and a genuinely lovable character, and to think that someone who lived her life so brightly like that chose death, it just really broke my heart. So yeah, all the characters in the story are just amazing. They feel real and are incredibly relatable. Something else that I also loved about this story is the romance between Clementine and Iwan. So this is one of those stories where the romance and the love is just so sweet. Iwan is an amazing green flag, and there's barely any drama or misunderstanding between them. The way Iwan treats Clementine like she's so precious makes me swoon every single time. He is so pure and passionate that I completely understood why Clementine fell so hard for him. I also feel like they are both foils and parallels for each other. Clementine grew to become more practical and jaded after her aunt's tragedy, but when she met Iwan 7 years in the past, she started to rekindle her passion for the arts and adventure. So the younger Iwan represents the kind of person Clementine probably thought she was going to grow up to become. Maybe like an alternate, happier version of herself, which is why she felt inexplicably drawn to him. And because she met Iwan in the past, she was also able to help Iwan in the present because just like her, he also grew up to become more realistic with his beliefs after his own grandpa's death. Iwan, who was an aspiring chef, wanted to create a restaurant that showcased his grandpa's love for food, the ordinary, and basically the homey kind of experience of having great food while being surrounded by family and friends. But as he grew up and became more famous, he ended up losing a part of himself by opening a restaurant that was popular, but more clinical and precise with fancy fine dining aspects. Basically, he lost the soul part of his culinary career and ended up chasing immediate fame and flair because he wanted to prove to himself that he could make it big. The final conflict between Clementine and Iwan involves them trying to reconcile their past with their present selves. It's not just about how much they love each other, but about finding their true selves all over again. And so together, I just really think that Clementine and Iwan are a perfect match. They complement each other so well and bring the best out of themselves when they're actually together. It's just the kind of romance that feels very comfortable. Like, it's an incredibly feel-good kind of romance that makes you all giddy inside because they're just so cute. It's been a while since I actually read a romance that is so pure and sweet. So I really enjoyed this book, and I think if you're the kind of person who, fantasizes or romanticizes these kind of sweet relationships where, you have the same passion and the same love for each other, I think you'll really like this book. Something else that I also wanted to talk more about are the themes being explored in this story. There's a lot of things going on in this story aside from the budding romance between Clementine and Iwan. First of all, let's talk about the theme of dealing with grief. So I'm sure all of us at one point in our lives will have to face a goodbye with some of our loved ones, whether they are friends or family. This is why Clementine and Iwan's story hits so hard in the feels, because I can see it actually happening to any of us. There's the kind of grief that comes from natural loss, but then there's also the heartbreaking kind that comes with the realization that someone you thought was living a happy life was actually suffering inside. There's a part of you that can't help but feel guilty for not being able to do more for your loved one before they decided to end their life. And this kind of tragedy can really change someone. Suicide is a delicate topic, and I don't want to cause any controversy or anything, but it really is one of the most painful things a family can ever go through. It's the kind of death that leaves a permanent scar on everyone around them, and honestly, it's not something anybody could actually ever, fully heal from. The wound will always be there, and with Clementine, she basically lost all faith in the kind of life her aunt lived. Basically the same kind of carefree life that she once admired. And what I appreciated about the story is how the author explored Clementine's grief, slowly allowing her to see the extraordinary in the ordinary again. Romance is not an all-time cure for grief, right? Time doesn't heal all your wounds, and that's perfectly okay. It's about learning to live again with what you have and finding happiness in the mundane life around you. And I think this story beautifully captures this sentiment. It's not just about dealing with grief and how it changes you, it's about being afraid of change itself as well. And Clementine and Iwan from the past are in completely different stages of life than their present selves. They both went through their own tragedies and ended up losing a part of their naive, innocent selves. And when they come together, they end up having to confront what they both lost throughout the years. But even if they know this, it doesn't change the fact that sometimes it's just really hard to change yourself for the better, because we've grown so used to the kind of normalcy and comfort that we created for ourselves. But ironically, the uncomfortable life that we grew into became more comfortable and less scary than the idea of becoming the best versions of ourselves. And this is especially true for Clementine because she's already on track for a promotion and has practically cinched a position as the top publisher at her company. So logically, she has a solid career and is living the kind of successful life that everyone dreams of. So there's basically no reason for her to throw away all of that happiness to chase her childhood dreams, right? But then she meets Iwan, who makes her remember what happiness actually tastes like again. And in the apartment, they are living in a timeline where her aunt is still alive and everything is perfect. So Clementine finds herself drawn to the past more and more, despite knowing that it's impossible for her to return back to her old self. So this is a story about coming to terms with who you used to be and who you are right now. It's essentially like a coming of age story, but for adults instead. And that's what I think is the best part of this book. The thing with grief is that sometimes it leaves you stuck in the past even as time moves on, right? And this magical apartment that her aunt gave her is a symbol for the unattainable past that she can never return to. But is this actually true? Of course, you can't return back to, the person that you used to be. We can't revive the dead either, and it's impossible to go back in time to fix our regrets. That's just not how real life works. But I don't think it means that, we can't try to move on from the past while also keeping a part of ourselves intact. So I really love the idea of basically Clementine and Ewan falling in love with the same person twice, but in different stages of their lives. I feel like if Clementine and Ewan got together before all of the tragedy happened, they probably wouldn't have made it. Like, it just wasn't the right timing for them. And it's also one of the main themes of the story that sometimes it's not a matter of time, but a matter of timing. Honestly, reading this book just kind of makes you believe in things like a happy ending or fate again. It's probably not realistic, obviously, because of the whole magic apartment thing, but it does make you kind of realize that maybe the only reason why you're not happy or fulfilled yet with your life is because your time isn't here yet. It makes you want to have hope in the future that you're building, that maybe it'll all be okay in the very end. So I genuinely think that this story is one that will make you feel good after finishing it. It's quite optimistic, but who doesn't need a bit more optimism in their lives, right? So now that I talked about the good things about this book, I think it's time we dive deep into what didn't quite work for me. And this will actually be a very quick section of this book review because there really was only one thing that I hated about the book. It was ultimately what kept this book from being a 5-star read for me, and it is the fact that the romance was just way too fast. For those of you who watch my other videos, you might recall that I'm a fan of slow burn stories, ones where we actually get a lot of time for the love to slowly develop. I love it when the characters stew in all the different emotions they feel about one another before coming to the realization that they love the other person. And this story is unfortunately a fast burn. And it's like incredibly fast. Like super fast. I'm not talking about like one night stand attraction level of fast burn, but it's still pretty damn close to it. Literally, ever since the first meeting, all Clementine can think about is how hot Ewan is. She keeps describing his looks and all the tattoos on his body, along with his voice and all that classic stuff. And then somehow, Ewan also reciprocates this strange magnetic pull and pretty much falls in love with her at first sight as well. Clementine obviously knows loving him is a bad idea because of their literal time difference, but then after 3 meetings with him, she finds herself utterly in love. And to make matters worse, I think they only met each other a couple of times inside the apartment. Probably not even long enough to last a whole week, but more like random days in between weeks. And I just couldn't fathom how they could be so head over heels in love with each other so quickly. It's honestly like Romeo and Juliet level of fast burn, but in modern times. So to be quite frank, I actually didn't really feel the romantic aspect of their relationship was believable. Of course, I understood the whole soulmate kind of theme that was going on and how they really did match each other because this was pretty much written as a fateful relationship. So even though logically it made sense they ended up together, I actually didn't feel the love that much. I kind of just accepted it at face value because the author was clearly really pushing them to be the romance of the century, the kind that transcends time and everything. And I genuinely wanted to feel more in love with the characters, but I just couldn't because of how fast they were, making out and everything. It's such a shame because I did like both of the characters. I loved everything about their relationship, but I just could not get over the fast attraction in the first half of the story. So in my opinion, the story starts off quite unbelievable, and then it slowly grows to become more relatable later on. Of course, I'm sure this is probably what the author intended, but still, I wished I could connect more with the romance of the two characters. Unfortunately, some things just continue to feel a bit off to me. With that said though, Clementine and Iwan are truly meant for each other, and they are an amazing green flag couple that makes each other better when they're together. So now we move on to the spoiler section of the book review, where I specifically talk about some of the scenes or decisions in the book that I liked or didn't like. So if you do plan on giving this book a try, you should stop watching this video right now before I end up spoiling the whole book for you. For those of you who have already read this book and want to hear more about specific things that I liked or didn't like, then follow me as we head over to the spoiler section of this book review. Alright, so despite all the good things that I said about this book, there were some tiny details or choices that I didn't particularly like or enjoy that much, but I just want to say that my opinion is subjective, okay? The story is still great, and at this point, I'm just kind of nitpicking so that I can have something to say. But as I mentioned before, I really just couldn't get over how fast they started falling in love and kissing each other. I think Iwan started calling Clementine by her nickname after like one meeting. He calls her Lemon, and honestly, I find it a little bit cringy. No offense to people who think it's sweet, because it is, but also I think if someone gave me a pet name of affection right after we just met, I'd be pretty put off by it. So yeah, I know I keep mentioning how fast they fall in love, but trust me, it's like the ultimate fast burn. It was honestly whiplash. There was also one other thing that got me feeling a little bit icky, like not disgusted, but certainly a little uncomfortable, because we realized later on in the story that Aunt Analia had a potential girlfriend named Vera, and that girlfriend is actually Iwan's mother. I know it's not like anything actually happened between Aunt Analia and her girlfriend, but if they actually got together, that would make Iwan and Clementine kind of family, and Iwan wouldn't actually even be born, right? So, of course, they're not going to be related by blood, so it's fine, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just a bit weird or iffy. So yeah, that was just kind of a strange reveal. I wasn't sure how to feel about it because I think the author was pushing the fate idea a bit too much. I know she made it seem like Iwan and Clementine's relationship is what Aunt Analia and Vera could have been, but I still think it was just too much, right? Like, I don't think she needed to make Vera related to Iwan at all. We didn't need this new piece of information. Everything was fine the way it was. Like, the author could have just made Vera be like a random person, right? Like, completely unrelated, like somebody who could maybe teach Clementine about having more courage and faith in reaching for her dreams or something. So I don't know, like it just felt a bit weird and just left a bitter taste on my tongue. Because obviously I was hoping for her aunt to get together with Vera, but if that happened, then Clementine and Iwan literally would not exist. So yeah. One last thing I also wanted to talk about is how we actually get to see a scene of Clementine visiting the apartment 7 years in the past, and then having her aunt still alive walking into the room. But this scene is actually cut to black, so we don't actually get to see Clementine talking to her dead aunt again. And a part of me thinks this decision was unsatisfying, but also completely understandable. A core theme of this story is that the past always stays with you, right? That wounds don't completely disappear. They become a part of you, and it's up to you to decide what you choose to do to move on from the past while carrying all these scars with you. And if Clementine got to speak with Analia, I think this would have cheapened the story, because as much as the story is about magical realism, I don't think the author wanted to make this like a fairy tale, right? Because life isn't that, right? So if Clementine actually got to talk to her aunt to like get over her past, it wouldn't really fit the theme of the book. In real life, we don't get second chances, right? Once someone is dead, they're dead and they remain dead, and there's no way to talk or reconcile their death with them. And at this point of the book, I think Clementine was already ready to move on with her life, and so she didn't need to end the chapter of her story with her aunt by having like another dramatic conversation. So yeah, I completely understood why the author made the scene fade to black. But as a person, we all wish for happy endings, right? So there is a part of me that did want to see what Clementine would actually say to Aunt Analia. And I also wanted to hear what Aunt Analia would tell Clementine with the knowledge of knowing that she commits suicide in the future. It's just the kind of wrap-up or conclusion that I want for them, but know that it's just not realistic for it to happen. So yeah, it's a very bittersweet story when it comes to Clementine and Aunt Analia's relationship, which in my opinion is honestly the best thing about this book. I really wanted to hear Aunt Analia speak to Clementine again, but it's probably for the best that it didn't actually happen. So to be honest, I actually didn't expect much from this story. From the summary, I had a feeling it would be too fairy tale-esque or sweet for my liking, but the whole underlying theme of dealing with grief and Aunt Analia haunting the narrative made this story an emotional roller coaster. Even after finishing it, I still can't move on from Clementine and Aunt Analia's relationship. Ewan, of course, is a great character, and the romance was incredibly soft and warm, but there's just no winning against Aunt Analia. She is, without a doubt, my favorite character of this entire story, even if she was dead the whole time. Personally, I gave this book 4.5 stars. If I were being incredibly lenient, I think this story is actually worthy of 5 stars. However, I deducted points because of that incredibly fast burn that got me annoyed in the first quarter of the book. But for those of you who just want to read a book with a green flag male lead and no drama, then this book is definitely for you. If you need a warm hug or are currently missing someone and finding it hard to move on, then I think you should give this book a try. It will definitely make you feel better about yourself, and perhaps maybe it'll give you the courage to take a step forward for the better, even if change might be scary at first. So yeah, I highly recommend this book to everyone. The prose is also very simple and easy to read, so you can probably finish the entire book in like one sitting. So yeah, that's it for my book review on the 7-Year Slip. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, until next time, may your skies always be blue. See you next read!